Welcome to the Disney Parks Podcast, your Disney infotainment podcast. Keep your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the podcast at all times and get ready for the Disney Parks Podcast.
All right, we have an interesting guest with an interesting topic. And you may say to yourself at first, well, what does this have to do with Disney, Tony? Are you off your rocker? So stick with us. But our author today is Stephen Hall. He's a museum curator, if I can speak today, historian, storyteller, history, hidden gems. Stephen's pathway into pharmacy history started by accident, volunteering at the University of Arizona, the History of Pharmacy Museum, which led him to become the first dedicated curator, restoring over 900 artifacts from Disneyland's former Upjohn Pharmacy to uncovering unloved chapters where science, culture, and storytelling collide. Stephen brings us history to life with scholarship, archival digging. Wow, I really can't speak that. And a love for the quirky corners of the past. So stay tuned. This is going to be a fun journey. So welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So give everybody like a brief history. What's the book about? If they purchase the book, what's the story where they're going to unfold?
Sure. So this book tells the whole entire story of the Upjohn Pharmacy in Disneyland, which was a day one attraction, one of the 1955 opening day, right on Main Street. It was in the park from 1955 until 1970, so the first 15 years. It was one of, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, it was one of a number of sponsors. There was also Carnation, Bank of America, Sunnyview, Jams and Jellies. There's all kinds of these early stores. Upjohn was one of them.
Right.
And it was sponsored by the Upjohn Company. And depending upon the age of who's listening, some folks may know Upjohn, others may not. Right. If you're over the age of, say, like 45, maybe a name that rings a bell. And if you don't know the name, you may know them by some of the products that they made. They made drug products like Cheracol, Kaopectate, Unicap vitamins,
right.
Phenolax. So they had a number of big drug products, and they were based in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Okay, right.
And so they wound up in Disneyland, and this book tells the whole story of that.
Yeah. So did they actually have like a shop? Because I know like Disney had a woman's lingerie store at first, and the story behind that was it was to keep Lillian in the park longer because she had no place to shop. So they built this little lingerie shop so that she would. I mean, she could have gone anywhere to get it, but Disneyland Park would have been a weird place to buy lingerie.
Yes, the Wizard of Bras. I've heard of this as well. So the Upjohn store did not actually sell anything.
Okay.
It was purely a replica of an old time apothecary, turn of the century era. And really it was a giant advertisement for the Upjohn Company. The one thing that they did give out was little sample bottles of Unicap vitamins. So they would visitors who'd come in would get a little bottle of vitamins, 12 of them, and the box was branded for Disneyland Park and the Upjohn Pharmacy. Also, they had some postcards that they would hand out to guests and stuff, but they did not actually sell any kind of drug products at all. It was really just for advertising.
Wow, that it's interesting that, and you have to ask, like, what did Upjohn pay Disney for that privilege of putting a, I'm going to quote, store in Disneyland? I mean, what was the price tag on that? Do we know?
Yeah, it was actually not as much as you might think. The rent, if I don't have the number in front of me, I think the rent was like $35,000.
Oh wow. Cheap.
So I mean, but Upjohn is a multi-million-dollar drug company.
Yeah.
So really, it was kind of a drop in the bucket for the level and depth of advertising potential that this offered for that company.
Yeah.
And in the store, they had actually several people that worked there full time, including two folks who were registered pharmacists in the state of California. So obviously, again, they didn't dispense any medication,
Yeah.
but they were licensed to if the store had done so.
Right.
But they were there, answering guest questions and
Yeah.
just kind of illuminating the history and all the historical pieces that were
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, I guess if they were giving medical advice, at least it came from a registered pharmacist, not
Sure, it was
a
actually
Disneyland
legit,
employee.
right? Right.
Customers, just say whatever you want. It's okay. It's okay.
Right.
So what? How did you get from doing the Upjohn Pharmacy research into saying, hey, you know what? This could be a book. People might be interested in this. How did you connect those dots?
Sure. So the story of this is it was sort of an unexpected connection. So
Mm,
I began working at it's called the History of Pharmacy Museum
okay.
at the University of Arizona when I was in grad school. I was in grad school and wanting to go into the museum field. And if you want to do that kind of work, it's really important to have volunteer experience. And so I was trying to get that experience as a grad student.
Right.
And I found a place in Tucson that would take a volunteer, and so I started working there. I didn't really have any knowledge of medical history.
Yeah.
Again, it was purely just a way to get museum experience, and I didn't really know much about Disney history either, beyond just kind of the basic knowledge that
Right.
the average person would have. So when I had just begun working there,
Hmm.
the person who would later become my supervisor when I worked there full time, he said, I have, there's like a huge mountain of boxes that I want you to unpack. I don't know what's in them. I know it's the stuff from the Upjohn Pharmacy in Disneyland. And I'd never
Wow.
heard of it before. I didn't know the Upjohn company. I was just thinking, what the heck? Like, there was a pharmacy in Disneyland? That seems bizarre. And I had
Right.
no foreknowledge of it.
Yeah.
And, and so I got to work unpacking these boxes and crates of really fabulous antique pieces. And without a medical history background, I didn't even really know at the time what they
Yeah.
all were, but I could tell they were special.
Okay.
The beautiful, delicate, handmade, hand painted, gold leaf. They're just, they're fabulous antiques. And so just that mystery and that Disneyland connection was enough to hook me.
Yeah.
And so when I started working there, we kind of made that the centerpiece of the museum. It's this crown jewel of the collection, and
Yeah.
that hook was a great way to get folks in the door
Sure.
who maybe weren't in medical history.
Yeah.
They don't really care about medicine or
Right.
or nursing or pharmacy, but they know they like Disneyland, and that was a good hook.
That
And
is the
so
hook.
and so when I was caring for this collection, if I'm going to be showing it off to visitors, it's important that I myself know the history, know the context and the stories. And so I began researching it, but I immediately found that there was like a very little that had ever really been written about this, very little substantive information out there.
Yeah.
And I was surprised because I'm like, Disneyland's a huge deal. Medical history is a big field.
Yeah.
And I'm just surprised that this hasn't been explored. And so I decided that I was going to write about it. It didn't initially. I wasn't thinking of it initially as a book, but it just
Right.
kind of got way out of hand,
Yeah.
and became a lengthy book. So
Well, cool. Well, we're glad it happened. Digging through those boxes and stuff, was there something in there that like you're like, wow, why was this here, or where did this come from, or what was the purpose of this in the shop, or was there any
yeah,
artifact that you were kind of shocked, or you were really taken aback, maybe made
I
your
mean,
jaw drop a little
so
bit?
yeah, well, yes. So there was a number of jaw-dropping moments. Unpacking these boxes felt like Christmas, um, and there was a few items in particular that were really spectacular.
Mm,
Um, there's these three pairs of humongous vessels that were from old apothecaries. Two pairs of them were reverse painted glass,
wow.
probably 2 feet tall and one
Yeah.
foot in
Yeah. Yeah.
diameter. Just these enormous urns for dry herb products, and then there was these two beautiful majolica vats for olive oil that were painted all around. They each
Hmm.
weighed like 50, 60 pounds.
Wow.
And I mean, they were probably 3 feet tall.
Yeah.
Um, and just to unpack these, I'm like, this is a fabulous piece.
Yeah.
There were also a set of 6 beautiful pendant lamps that you can see in the old photos
Yeah.
hanging from the ceiling. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot, and one thing that is fun about seeing these old archival photos from Main Street is I know each and every one of those pieces,
Right.
and I could say, oh yeah, I remember working on that one, and
Right.
that one was sitting in my office, and I remember hanging that up on the ceiling, and
Yeah. Right.
so it's fun to have that kind of personal connection. But there was all kinds of
Yeah. Do you think
jaw
that some of
dropping
these,
moments.
yeah, do you think these were made specifically for the Disneyland store, or were they something that Upjohn just had and said, "Hey, let's just put these in the store. They'll look cool and people will like them."
Yeah, that's a great question. So nothing that was in the store was fabricated for Disneyland. It was
Okay.
all antiques.
Okay.
And even in 55, they
Yeah.
were already antiques. I mean,
Wow.
there were pieces there that dated back to the 1600s.
Right.
Um, not the majority. The majority were 18 to early, like mid 18 to mid 1900s.
Right.
But I mean, those lamps, for example, I mean, probably were at the time 80 to 100 years old.
Wow. Wow.
Already, and now obviously they're much older than that.
Yeah.
But
Right.
all these pieces were collected in shortly before the park opened. Upjohn had on staff, one of their executives was sort of a medical history hobbyist,
Oh.
and so he knew all about medical antiques, knew people that had them, knew what he was looking for, what was valuable. And so Upjohn sent him all around the country over a period of 6 weeks, just buying whatever he wanted. And a lot of this stuff
Nice job.
ultimately then wound up in Disneyland and then
Yeah.
at the University of Arizona eventually.
Yeah. Crazy. Did you go out and like hunt down Upjohn employees that that had a connection to this and interview them for the book as well?
I did. And again, one of the challenges that I faced early on was that there was very little that had ever been written about this. I
Yeah.
mean, only like 2 or 3 things I could find.
Right.
Um, but early on, this would have been about 2014.
Okay.
I connected with a gentleman named Jeremy Winkworth, who
Mm.
was he's a retired Upjohn employee, spent his
Right.
whole career with the company, and he is the historian for Upjohn.
Okay.
He's in possession of all kinds of archives from the company. He's the one who knows everything, and
Right.
so I connected with him real early. And he runs the website upjohn.net, which is just his historical
Sure.
records of the company. And I connected with him, just sort of cold calling and saying, we have this stuff. Can you tell me anything about it? And he set me up with some documents and other connections that were really great. But
Mm.
his own recollections of working at Upjohn and knowing the history,
Yeah.
as well as other folks I met along the way who had worked there, or were descendants of folks who had worked there. Various
Wow.
archives and libraries around West Michigan that have records and stuff. So it was an ongoing process making these connections. But I mean, I met some remarkable people along the way, both on the pharmacy side and the Disney side as
Oh,
well.
cool. Yeah, very cool. Do we know, like, I can't imagine, like, how did Walt Disney himself, not the company, how did Walt Disney, the person, make a relationship and say, hey, this would be a cool thing to have in the park? Let's have a. Understandably, he was trying to recreate, a turn of the century Main Street, and it obviously would have had a pharmacy on it. But, what was the connection between like Walt Disney and Upjohn, the company?
You're asking all the great questions. So yes, first of all, what you said is exactly right. Pharmacies were really a key part of American main streets.
Yeah.
That corner drugstore, of that notion of the corner drugstore, is very well established in American history.
Yeah.
And Walt certainly knew that. Um, the way that he connected to Upjohn specifically is actually a great story. So he was Walt was friends with a gentleman named Donald Gilmore, and
Okay.
Gilmore was the head of the Upjohn Company. So Gilmore lived, of course, in Michigan,
Hmm.
where Upjohn was headquartered. But in the wintertime, he had a vacation home in Palm Springs, California at Smoke Tree Ranch.
Okay.
So in the wintertime, he would spend his winter months living in the same community as Walt, and the
Hmm.
two men were friends. They were lawn
Wow.
bowling partners, and for the rest of the year, they would write each other letters. A lot of their correspondence is archived around in places around West Michigan,
Yeah.
and so there was already this kind of existing connection between the heads of the Disney and Upjohn companies.
Mm.
But that's ironically not where the original idea came from.
Right.
The Upjohn company had, in addition to Don Gilmore as the head of the company, one of his right hand guys was a gentleman named Jack Gauntlet, and
Okay.
Gauntlet was their advertising director.
Hmm.
He was really the one that had the original idea for what if we put a pharmacy in Disneyland. That was his brainchild.
Yeah.
And when he had approached Don Gilmore with the idea, ironically, Jack Gauntlet didn't know that Gilmore and Disney were already friends. He didn't know
Right.
that. It was
Right.
truly an independent idea. But then when he approached Don Gilmore about it, of course, Gilmore said, "Funny that you mentioned this. Let me call my friend Walt and we'll make it happen."
Yeah.
So it was just
Wow.
a very fortuitous situation that led to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I assume the book has some images. Now, where would like those images come from? Were those part Disney archives, part Upjohn archives?
Yeah. So first of all, there's just shy, I think, of 100 photos in the book.
Wow.
I mean, and they came from all over. Some of them are there's a number of photos of Walt that I'd imagine that almost no one has seen before. I mean, they're
Yeah.
extremely rare.
Yeah.
Um, but the photos came from a number of sources. So my friend Jeremy Winkworth,
Hmm.
he was kind enough to send some of the early photos that he had, again, from the Upjohn archives directly,
Right.
of the store and the main street exterior.
Right.
So the physical space, Jeremy sent a lot of the photos that depicted that. Then Walt, in his life, made multiple trips to Kalamazoo to
Okay.
visit Don Gilmore and the Upjohn Company. And so in Kalamazoo, Walt's visit was a big deal. They still commemorate it to this day with Walt Disney Day.
Yeah.
But his trips to Kalamazoo were very well documented with photographs. And so there's this whole treasure trove repository um, that is managed by Western Michigan University. And it's owned by a place called the Gilmore Car Museum. Don Gilmore was an avid car
Oh.
collector.
Oh, nice.
And so between the museum he established and West Michigan University's libraries,
Right.
they manage this just really terrific collection of Walt and his whole tour around Kalamazoo, showing him, signing autographs for the children, showing him driving in classic cars with Don Gilmore, showing him at the Upjohn hangar at the airport.
Right.
All just this really wonderful repository of
Yeah.
pictures of these trips that he
Right.
took.
Right. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Were there any like myths or things that you uncovered that probably people needed? Well, probably just needed correction, or like, hey, that wasn't really true about the pharmacy or the Disneyland or the Upjohn backstory.
Yeah, sure. So one thing that there were some conflicting accounts about was whether the store actually did dispense medication
Yeah.
or not. And I have actually seen sources that say both ways.
Yeah.
And I am convinced that they did not. Besides the Unicap vitamins that they gave out, I am convinced that any sources that say they did are incorrect. But on a more like lighthearted note, there was, you mentioned a myth, and there's a
Yeah.
terrific myth because for folks who remember visiting the Upjohn store, the two things they usually remember are getting the vitamin bottle and
Okay.
also the fact that they had a jar of leeches. Leeches were an old time
Right.
medical remedy.
Yeah.
So they had a leech jar with real leeches in there, and there's this. I would almost call it like a Disney urban legend. And there's multiple versions of the story, like any good urban legend, but the general premise is around 1970, when Upjohn was leaving,
Hmm.
someone at the store dumped the leech jar into one of the waterways as a way to dispose of the leeches. And as a
Right.
result, the water became infested with leeches and had to be drained, and all this maintenance had to be done.
Right.
And again, multiple versions of the story. Some
Yeah.
say that it was, it was coincidence. Upjohn had nothing to do with it. It just was. It was a coincidence.
Yeah.
Some say no, it was a disgruntled employee who was angry about being ousted from the park. Some say it was the Jungle Cruise Lagoon. Some say it was Rivers of America, and it doesn't really matter actually.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
it's just a hilarious story. I mean, for all I know, it may well be true. I don't know, and we'll
Yeah.
probably never know.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's this humorous urban legend always makes me laugh. If you just Google, Upjohn Pharmacy or like Upjohn Disneyland leeches,
Yeah.
you'll find on message boards, you'll find references to this story, and it's a very fun narrative, whether
Yeah.
it's true or not.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to Google it. You know what? I'm gonna ask like ChatGPT just to
Yeah.
see what AI thinks of that. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Anything in the archives that you found, like any strange memos or odd artifacts that kind of made you do a double take?
Yeah, so I found again at Western Michigan University in their archives, I found a memo that had been sent within the Upjohn office about like a refurbishment
Yeah.
that was taking place in the store, and it throughout the time there, they had a couple of different exhibits that would change and rotate, and there's not a whole lot of information about what they were, but there's one reference in this office memo to what they call the male and female anatomy exhibits.
Oh boy.
And when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay. And so the memo says, quote, and this is a quote, "It caused the nearest thing to a furor that has ever been seen on Main Street."
Wow.
And like, I wish that I could find more information because it sounds hilarious.
Right.
We don't really know, and we may never know, but just the one allusion to that in this memo made me chuckle.
Yeah.
There were other parts. The research took me in a lot of weird directions too.
Yeah.
There's a narrative in there about a crooked doctor who was digging up bodies in a cemetery in the dead of night in Marceline. I mean, it took me down all these rabbit holes that I wasn't expecting,
Yeah.
but were fun to go explore. And I would hope
Sure.
that readers would have fun exploring them with me.
Yeah. It's fascinating that things around Walt Disney, the person and the company, like always get archived or kept, or
Yeah.
nothing seems to ever get thrown out. I mean, if you do the digging hard enough of the research, I mean, it's all over the place, because
Yeah.
Disney was all over the country and even all over the world. And I applaud the Disney company for, trying to keep it all.
Mhm.
It's a big job. It's a big job.
Yeah. It's too bad because today the Upjohn company is under Pfizer. They're a subsidiary, so technically they still exist as a subsidiary, but for all intents and purposes, they're really not around anymore. But what that meant was that when Pfizer came into the picture, and this was right around the millennium, right around like the late 90s and early aughts, when Pfizer came in, they essentially did away with the entire Upjohn archive. The company had kept really robust records of itself since the beginning. So they had like a century worth of of really detailed company records. And Pfizer just kind of said they just looked at it as an unnecessary expense. And so around this, around that 2000s era, they just chucked most of the archive. And again, my friend Jeremy personally salvaged a lot of it.
Yeah.
But surely there are a number of Disneyland related records that were thrown out. I mean,
Yeah.
we'll never know what they were. They're long gone. And that is tragic. I mean, and even besides, I mean, records really that would be of interest to medical historians or to the people who live in Michigan. I mean, there's a lot of really good history that surely was lost, unfortunately. But I mean, some of it does survive, thankfully.
Right. What do you think what do you think the perception today would be if that still existed in Disneyland? I mean, would people go, "Oh, that's a cool place to visit, but why is that here? And why can't I buy anything?"
I mean, I look at this as really just kind of the way that the park has changed.
Sure.
Because for all the things that have stayed the same, it is a different place than it was in the 50s, for better or for worse. That's up to you.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would argue that Main Street in the early days had more character.
Yes.
Than it does now.
Sure.
What we see today when we walk down Main Street is a lot of the same things. Yeah. Disney owned gift shops that sell Disney merchandise. Yeah. And that's what you get. And that's fine. I mean, I buy a lot of it. But
sure.
but the fact is we don't see this diversity of offerings on Main Street the way that we once did.
Yeah.
There is no Wizard of Bras. There's no Jam and Jelly store. There's no Upjohn Pharmacy or the Bank of America.
Penny Arcade or the Magic Shop.
Yeah. Right. And I feel like it's kind of the natural progression of things. Sure. Once Disney figured out that they didn't really need outside sponsors, it seems inevitable that they would, kind of start to make it more their own space. Rather than renting it out to others. They get, 100% of the profits that way. So it makes sense in terms of business and just the general progression of things. But at the same time, I do feel that, yes, something maybe has been lost in over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Were there challenges connecting the medicine, the marketing, and the entertainment of this story? Was that...
Yes, definitely. Yeah. I mean, the fact that the records were so sparse to begin with made it difficult, but also the fact that I was trying to weave together some very disparate topics. Medical history, Disney history, Walt's own life and upbringing, and how that sort of unexpectedly related to medicine, looking at the Upjohn health films that Disney produced in the late 60s. So there's all these different threads that I was trying to weave together, and it was challenging. But I do think that ultimately it tells a pretty compelling story, and something that I was always surprised by was just how big the story is.
Yeah.
Because the Upjohn Pharmacy is something that even, people who are well-versed in Disney history may not have ever heard of it. I mean, that's like deep knowledge for Disney history.
Right.
And so it's only like the most hardcore folks that would have even known about it. And so it's strange to me that this thing that you could easily dismiss as just like an obscure footnote from long ago is actually this big, giant story. I was surprised by that.
Right.
And I would hope that, if for folks who read this, that they would be surprised as well. There's a lot more to this than you might expect.
Yeah. Now, you said that all this stuff is in a museum, correct?
That's correct. Today it lives at the museum's name has changed. When I started there, it was the History of Pharmacy Museum. Today it's called the Coit, C-O-I-T, the Coit Museum of Pharmacy and Health Sciences. It's at the University of Arizona in Tucson. So for folks who like to do Disney pilgrimages, you can see these things in person.
Wow. Yeah. That'd be very cool. Very cool. Um, what was I gonna say here? Um, there was what was a weird note here? Uh, oh, um, no, that wasn't it. Sorry,
No,
lost
don't
my
worry about it.
lost my train of thought for a second. Um, did the Fribble pill story? How did that change the this kind of the pharmaceutical history story here?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So this is the thing that Upjohn. This is so yeah. It's called the friable pill was the
Fireball,
thing that
sorry.
kickstarted uh, Upjohn's success. This is in 1886, and it's important to contextualize this by saying that this was a very different time in medicine than we think
Mm,
of now. Medicine and pharmacy in the 1880s and before was like dingy apothecaries and no real medical science. It was
right.
herbs and potions and cocaine and stuff. And so, it was a very far cry from where we are today. So to put it in context, I'll start there. So pills, as they were prior to Upjohn's founding,
Mm,
were they were very ineffective, to say the least. First of all, very laborious to make.
yeah.
They had to be made. It was almost like making bread. They had to be like a dough formed. They had to be rolled by hand,
Mm,
baked, coated. It was a
wow.
very labor intensive process, and the what you'd actually get from them was almost no therapeutic effect. There's
Yeah.
all kinds of reasons for this, and I'll spare you the details, but in essence, pills were inexact, they were ineffective, and they were
Mm,
extremely laborious to make.
mm,
So what Upjohn had done, what W.E. Upjohn, the founder, had done, is he created a whole new process for making pills. And it is detailed in the book exactly like mechanically how it worked, but the long and short of it is what W.E. Upjohn created was an entirely new way to make pills that solved every problem that I just listed.
okay.
It was easier to make them uniform, so there was not a whole lot of variance in the dosage. They were easier to take. They were softer. Friable means they were soft versus
Okay.
pills that were before, because they were baked in an oven, were very hard and did not
Mm,
often absorb quickly.
okay.
So the Upjohn pills were very soft and they would take effect quickly. They could be made in large batches, and it was all automated by a machine. So it,
Oh,
it
wow.
was it in every way was superior to everything that had come before. So it really was a pretty pivotal moment in the progression of medical science. Upjohn's innovation was really a big deal.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Uh, if you had to add a chapter to the book, something that you thought you left out, you put to the side because you didn't think it was cool. Is there anything you'd add to the book?
Yeah, so again, I know that the store had exhibits that came through.
Mm,
I know that I've seen references to it. I was never really able to find much about them besides one or two. There's one particular exhibit that there is some good documentation for that I elaborate on in here,
yeah.
and a couple of others that are to a lesser degree, like the male and female anatomy exhibit. I know it was a thing,
Yeah.
but I don't know much about it. So I wish that there was better documentation about this. The other thing is, I never was able to get into the Walt Disney Archives because at the
Oh,
time that I was, um, getting to that stage in my research was right when the pandemic shut everything down.
oh, that
So
sucks.
they, understandably,
Yeah.
they closed the archives to the public for an indefinite amount of time. So I was that I mean, so it I'm not exactly sure what the Walt Disney Archives holds
Mm,
pertaining to the Upjohn Pharmacy.
yeah.
Um, so, if I was ever able to get in there, I would love to see just what documentation they have.
Right.
But beyond that, I mean, I do feel like this is a very, very thorough account of everything from the inception of the idea to how the collection was assembled, who the key players were that made it happen,
Right.
what the store was like, how it operated, how it, what happened after it closed, how we as the museum got it, my own experiences. I really tried to cover every avenue in it as well. And also, even looking at Walt's life and where there's these sort of unexpected connections to health sciences that I was surprised by myself.
Yeah.
So I tried to take a whole bunch of different angles in this book.
Yeah. Well, maybe you can get access to the archives and there'll be a part 2.
We'll see. Yeah, I certainly still hope to get in there someday.
Yeah.
There were I mentioned, I alluded to this earlier. There were a series. It was a series of 4 short films that Disney created for Upjohn in the late '60s, just before Walt died, called the Triangle of Health series. And I suspect that the Disney archives would have more documentation about those that I would like to see as well. That's, I wrote a whole chapter about them, but I do suspect there's a couple of more items that the archives have that would be relevant.
Yeah. I see a second book.
I mean, at some point in the research process, you just have to say, this is done.
Yeah.
I like it. I may not have covered 100%, but it's done.
Yeah, I get it. So, what do you hope that readers will, get from the book? What do you want them to take away? I mean, first of all, for me, I had no idea a pharmacy existed. I mean, I've heard crazy stories of things that were on Main Street, but I should have assumed pharmacy, but I didn't. And I heard the crazy story about the lingerie store and things like that. But, so what do you want readers to take away from this?
Yeah, again, I mean, I think one of the key things is I would hope that readers would be surprised. Even for folks who already know about the Upjohn store. Again, it would be easy to dismiss this as a pretty meaningless or trivial footnote in Disney history.
Sure.
It's a much bigger story than you might have thought. And I would hope that folks would be surprised by that. I would also hope that they have fun going down these weird rabbit holes that I had fun going down in my research. Beyond that, also, I mean, I do think that there's a lot to learn here about the history of pharmacy and medicine. I mean, it's something that I would imagine that folks who read this would mostly be of the more like Disney history oriented.
Right.
And the book does deal a lot with medical history, which is something that folks might not know as much about, or vice versa. Someone who's reading it as a medical historian maybe could learn a lot about Disney history that they didn't know either. Yeah. Again, when I came into this, I didn't know much about either. So I had fun learning about both simultaneously. Right. And I do feel like there is something here for everybody. Whatever background you're coming into this from, I do think there's stuff that you will be able to learn about and you might not know about already.
Yeah, maybe it straddles if you're a pharmacist and a Disney nerd, this is the book for you.
Yeah. Yep. It is pretty deep. It's a deep cut in terms of Disney history.
Yeah.
But it goes, very, very, very deep into this one subject.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. So the book is called A Spoonful of Sugar, the story of the Upjohn Pharmacy in Disneyland. Tell everybody where they can find the book, where they can find you, if they got more questions or want to visit a museum, all that stuff.
Sure. So the book is available. It's published by the Old Mill Press. So the website is theoldmillpress.com. Mm-hmm. It's also available Amazon, Barnes & Noble, various other retailers online. As far as how to get in touch with me, people, you're certainly able to reach out to me via email. You can feel free to share my contact info if you'd like. Okay. I'll be happy to reach out to folks if folks want to reach out to me via email. Yeah. If you want to share your memories or whatnot, I'd be happy to hear about them. Yeah. As far as where they can see the collection, again, so where it lives is at the Coit Museum of Pharmacy and Health Sciences. That's a part of the University of Arizona College of Pharmacy in Tucson.
Okay.
So it's open to the public. No admission fee. It's free to come visit.
Yeah.
And you can see all these really wonderful pieces with your own eyes.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you, Stephen. This was very interesting. I learned something about Disneyland history that I really didn't know. So that's always good for me. 'Cause I'm a Disney nerd.
Yeah, well, I think it is cool. It's fun to have sort of played this role, however small,
Mhm.
in this larger Disney history world. It's been a very rewarding thing to be the one to tell this story that's really never been told up to this point.
Right. Right. Well, thank you for coming. I had a great time, and as we like to say around here, we'll see you in the parks.
Appreciate it.
The Disney Parks podcast is not affiliated with the Walt Disney Company. All Disney parks, attractions, lands, shows, event names, etc. are registered trademarks of the Walt Disney Company.